out all your sins.
Relax. I'd rather not piss this thing off.
This one is machine and nerve, and has its mind concluded. This one is but flesh and faith, and is the more deluded.
Kill me or release me, parasite. But do not waste my time with talk.
There is much talk, and I have listened through rock and metal and time. Now I shall talk, and you shall listen.
Greetings.
So, when this show was announced, I, like a lot of people, had pretty low expectations. So one of the biggest red flags for me was when Stephen Kane, who's like the director or whatever the fuck you want to call it, basically said that nobody went into this having played the video game, which I just think is weird right off the bat, that nobody on your production team or whatever has played the fucking Halo video game. It's like one of the most popular video games of all time. They never played the video game when they made this show. They never looked at the books. They never did any research on the fucking the lore. They didn't do any research on it, and they just made it. They wanted to approach it with a new lens, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Now, some of the arguments I've seen made about this show are the fact that it's not actually the Halo universe. It is not canon. It is actually the Silver Timeline, which, well, I'm willing to accept that this is undoubtedly an alternate universe, but it so blatantly ignores the source material to the point where it's not even just an alternate universe. It's a different fucking dimension where the laws just are completely different from the fundamentals, right? It would be like if I tried to compare how high a fish could climb a tree. You guys get that reference? A lot of people enjoyed this, but considering I am what you would call kind of a fucking nerd for Halo. Like, honestly, Halo's my favorite series of all time. I own every book. I've read every book. I've played every video game, obviously. And we can disagree. I honestly think Halo started to get shitty after Halo 4. Just because they introduced the Spartan 4s and they kind of ignored the Spartan 3s. And I feel like the whole story just took a horrible change for the worst, right? But that's not the point. The point is that I really like Halo. So it's really no surprise that when I saw this series and I watched it, I was just like, what is this shit? Okay. But let's save my opinion for later. You know, let's kind of break down what the series has done right so far, which is very little, and what the series has done wrong, which is quite a lot. The premiere episode starts off pretty tame, and I don't think anyone would have any real complaints about it, especially if you've read a lot of the novels or whatever. Even if you just played the game, it's actually it's probably one of the best openings to a show that I've seen in a while, which is why it's so disappointing. But anyway, it introduces us to one of our main characters, an insurgent named, I don't care. I just don't care what her name is, but she's the daughter of the leader of this colonized world of insurgents, right? And for those of you who might know might not know the basic canon story behind this, the UNSC does not like the insurgents, and the insurgents do not like the UNSC. There's your kind of cut, print, and press. That's as basic as it can get, right? The UNSC kind of controls society, and the insurgents view that as a dictatorship, and they want to be self-governed and free, etc., etc. So prior to the Covenant being introduced into the main timeline, the insurgents were the main baddies, and that's basically who the Spartans fought against, which it was pretty unfair. Let's just put it that way. It wasn't very fair. So this chick harbors hopes of getting off world and getting high off of nuts that double as fuel for starships and psychedelics. Because why the fuck not? That's probably One of the funniest things, and they literally eat a nut that doubles as reactor fuel or some shit, but it also makes you really high. I mean, fucking, why wouldn't? But this group of quaint teenagers just tripping absolute balls is interrupted when they notice a spaceship, or specifically the chick notices a spaceship, and not just any spaceship, a weird spaceship. You and I already know that this is a Covenant ship, obviously, right? So she notices that there appears to be some form of excavation going on, right? And rushes down to tell her friends about the potential invaders, who they all assume are the UNSC, which, to be fair, that's kind of like UNSC's deal. They would kind of find these insurgent outposts and just wax them. Brief words are exchanged between these groups of teenagers, and then they start fucking exploding. Like, this is the moment in the show where my hopes were so fucking high, right? Like, death metal is playing in the background, and these teenagers are exploding, and the Covenant are just fucking shooting at them, and it's kind of cool, right? What follows is like this intensely gore display of the Covenant's weapons and how they're effective. You know, people are blown apart. They begin a siege on the insurgent outpost with, you know, only a handful of elites, which, whether intentional or not, this was kind of a nice little nod to the military ability of the Covenant. They absolutely dominate space warfare to the point where it's cheating. Like, it's not even fair. But when they're on ground and they're fighting actual troops, they're totally dominant, but not to the point where they're unkillable. So it's not totally unfair. What usually makes the Covenant completely unfair is their use of shield technology, right? And Covenant shields have been pretty consistent throughout all timelines, right? They have kind of advanced, I think, in this book. They advance, like, they become a little higher in grade. There's a story in Halo Evolutions called Headhunters. I'm sure some of you, if you've read that, have heard about that. That story showcases, you know, elites using way higher powerful shields because they did this thing where they reverse engineered the reverse engineering of the reverse engineered. It's just confusing, but the point is that their shields do eventually get upgraded, but at this point in time, it's all pretty standard, cut and dry, right? The Covenant main infantry force consists of elites, and they use these shields pretty much consistently at any point in time when they're fighting. Just like their ships, energy shields let them pretty much harmlessly deflect most damage from small caliber rounds, which good for you. However, just like the spaceships, these energy shields that the elites have also have weaknesses. Now, in the original timeline, when the Covenant showed up, they were completely bullshit. And by which I mean that they were capable of taking on, like, one Covenant ship could take on, like, 3 UNSC ships that were classified as, like, destroyers, right? And now, to you and me, this might not seem like that big of a deal, but we're talking about, like, a ship this big taking on, like, 3 ships that are, like, this big, right? It's kind of unprecedented, but the thing is that they almost never sustain damage in the fights, and this is due to a lot of the UNSC ships being fitted with Archer missile pods and MAC cannons, and I think they use, like, remote tactical nukes sometimes, but most of the time that would literally just cripple their own ship instead of actually hurt the Covenant ship. The point is that none of the UNSC's weapons seem to be able to get through the shields of the Covenant ship, even though there would be, like, obvious damage, right? Like, they would shoot a Mac round at the Covenant, which is the magnetic accelerated cannon. They would shoot one at the Covenant shields, and the ship would kind of dent, and the Covenant ship would tumble around, but then it would just right itself, and it would be totally fine, right? Now, the UNSC eventually developed a counter for these shields after observing that light rounds rarely penetrated Covenant shields unless you essentially emptied the whole magazine point blank. But shotguns and grenades were still super effective. Grenades wouldn't always kill them. Sometimes it would just blow off a limb and they'd totally be fine, other than, you know, missing a limb. But shotguns were usually pretty point blank, period, successful penetration through the shields. So what they expertly determined is that if they focus all their fire on a single point, they would breach the shield. The second part of that made Covenant ships so unannoyingly powerful is the fact that they use plasma weapons, which isn't to say that they just fired plasma willy-nilly. It was plasma that was controlled by some electromagnetic field and could be steered, right? So even if you managed to maneuver out of the way of it, it would just turn and hit you, which is just weird. But the point is that Covenant technology has advanced so far in terms of space warfare that they're pretty much unmatched. That was until the UNSC pulled out the Pillar of Autumn. The Pillar of Autumn, as we all know it, is that ship in Halo Combat Evolved that explodes and destroys the ring. Now, what you might not really be aware of is the lore of the ship. The ship is actually outfitted with a prototype MAC cannon, and instead of firing one massive slug, it fires 3 slugs in rapid succession. So the first 2 slugs are made to kind of knock out the shields, and the last slug is made to go through, just kind of like a battle rifle, right? That's the theory behind it. It also sports a lighter frame. It can maneuver quicker. The ship is essentially built to be functioned even when it's like pretty much completely crippled, which is totally better all around, right? And that, and the fact that you had Captain Keyes, who is one of the most decorated, smartest ship maneuver captains of all time, right? He's one of the people that actually managed to defeat 3 Covenant ships with just 1 ship by himself. Obviously, you know, he had the giant ship and he almost died in the process, but still, he managed to kill 3 Covenant ships with 1 ship, which was completely unprecedented and probably the first time in human history that, you know, they managed to kill the Covenant. That, and alongside, they sported some new type of slipspace reactor that allowed them to make quicker, more accurate jumps. The Pillar of Autumn was the first offensive line in the UNSC, right? And the Spartan 2s were initially supposed to use the Pillar of Autumn to cripple a ship, a Covenant ship, take the Covenant ship to the home planet of the Covenant and blow it the fuck up, right? That was their plan. This, of course, is all before the fall of Reach. The fall of Reach is when the Covenant unintentionally found humanity's, or I should say UNSC's, kind of military stronghold, right? It was the strongest, most fortified military planet in all of humanity, right? Even more, allegedly, even more armed than actual Earth was, right? And the Covenant just destroyed it completely, 100% obliterated it, and it was gone. And just so happened the Pillar of Autumn was in that fight, and fleeing this fight is exactly where Halo Combat Evolved begins. Anyway, back to the story. What we witness is complete and total slaughter, right? Despite the insurgents having a relatively decent looking defense and armament, the elites are pretty much just walking around like in a straight line at them. It's a pretty good opening scene, right? It's a pretty good opening scene. The Covenant are ruthless. They kill children, women, all this shit, which is totally accurate to how the Covenant actually behave, right? But the reason is a little different, right? The Covenant pretty much go like 6 and 148, right? Great KD ratio. They just absolutely destroy everything. The problem happens once the Spartans start to show up. Right off the bat, the Spartans perform what I can only consider in modern media as a superhero landing. And I just think it's so fucking stupid. It really is. It is one of the stupid. I've always had a lot of issues with these new editions of Halo kind of implying that Spartans are superheroes and not just super soldiers, right? Even in Halo Infinite, some of the things that Master Chief performs are well beyond the scope of one Spartan. And he even gives this heroic speech to someone who's feeling sad, and it's just kind of cringy and weird. But my overall point is that the Spartans are not superhuman. In fact, the Spartans, like, even against fully armored with full shields, the Master Chief in his brand new armor with Cortana helping him still struggled to kill a single elite in hand-to-hand combat. And the point remains that they are not superheroes. You can't have them doing all this weird extra shit. I remember, what was it, the opening for Halo 5, I think, where they have Bucky, who's a brand new Spartan 4, which, don't even get me started on how shitty those characters are. Brand new Spartan 4, and they're just all this crew is just like rolling through a Covenant army, just like it's like a montage of them beating the shit out of toddlers, right? It's not what Spartans are meant to be. It's not what Spartans are in the first place. So that was really annoying to me. You know, there are moments in the story where, you know, a Spartan's durability is tested, I guess, right? There's always that scene from, I think, Halo 3 where John is crashing through the atmosphere or whatever and lands, and, you know, and he the only reason he manages to live is thanks to his armor locking up, and he suffers serious internal damage, but he just gets up and keeps going, which is kind of like the Spartan thing, right? But John's first display of human strength and inhuman strength and endurance was not too long after he received Cortana, by which I mean almost literally like the second after he gets Cortana. He gets blown up multiple times, backhands a missile, and gets blown up again, all to ring a bell. And John is almost crippled by this, right? He's completely fucked up, and there's always a point in either the books or somewhere in there where you get a glimpse of John being a human. And the important thing to remember about John is that he's not even the strongest Spartan. He's one of the just average Spartans. The only thing that John has above anybody else is his luck. That's the joke of the character, is that he's lucky. Even then, performing typical like ridiculous stunts like this is just not how John would perform missions. It's not tactical, it's not practical, it just looks cool, right? From when he was a child, John was intentionally overzealous, over emotional. He quickly learned the value of like teamwork and almost never overestimated his own abilities, which kind of made him one of the most effective Spartans. Basically, at this point, what I'm trying to say is this is a superhero, not a Spartan. That's not a Spartan. So the fight gets pretty one-sided from here, as you could expect, right? With John and his fellow Spartans a part of Silver Team, and I think, I can't be sure on this, and don't quote me on this about Silver Team, because I could be wrong, I could be talking out of my ass, but from what I remember, there are, in the Thursday War, there is a team called Gray Team, who consists of 3 members, and they're kind of out, and there's also a story in Halo Revolutions involving a team. They call themselves Black Team, and they go by Black 1, Black 2. They don't give themselves numbers or names. They strictly go by Black 1 and Black 2. And I think Silver Team is kind of inspired from that, but I honestly don't know. But what I do know is that it seems like they just took the characters from Blue Team and stuck them onto Silver Team and just kind of reskin them, right? Because the main players in Blue Team were always Sam, who is the strongest Spartan. You had Fred, who is the Spartan that was basically considered the best Spartan, right? He could have won everything. He always decided to come in second place. He was the second best shot. He was the second at everything. But the whole point is that he didn't want to be first. He just didn't want the attention. He's also probably the most human-looking one of them, as described as he just looks normal, kind of, right? But he's also fucking ruthless, right? And you have Kelly, who is the fastest of them. Like, you're talking people that can run super fast, and she can run faster than them by a mile, right? So it's kind of impressive. And then you have Linda, who is their sniper. She's 100% accurate all the time. Her sniper carries around a custom one, blah, blah, blah. It seems like they literally just took these characters and kind of pasted them onto this new armor thing or whatever and just called it good. I'm not a fan of it, just because they didn't try to make these characters themselves, right? There's so many Spartans out there that are just not these 3 core aspects, right? Really fast, really strong, really snipey, right? The point is that there's other Spartans out there that you could use, and I just felt like this one was just kind of overused, or whatever the fuck. So they effectively kill all the elites. They clean everything up. The chick's father is killed in front of her by the Covenant leader, and John uses a mounted turret to put down the elite leader. And something a lot of people pointed out was that the turret doesn't seem to work when anybody else is using it but John. And that that's a pretty big oversight, right? While the shot of the elites kind of just casually walking into gunfire is kind of cool, it is impractical, and it's just not really how the species would function. Not especially not the elites, right? You'd believe that the elites would send a legion of grunts in there and let them get slaughtered like that, but they wouldn't just walk in there. The elites are way more. They're warriors at heart, right? They're visceral. They're incredibly fast and agile. They would just run through these people so fast it's ridiculous. So basically, the turret is useless unless John uses it, which understandable, I guess. Following this, the Master Chief and the gang, they all snoop around the Covenant ship. They find that what they were excavating and notice a strange alien artifact. Which, as you know, whenever you see a strange alien artifact, you touch it, right? That's just what you do. Yeah, this part was also a little weird just because the Master Chief would definitely not touch some floating stone. The few times he encountered an alien artifact, he specifically avoided touching it at first until he was forced to because he had to run away. Of course, by touching this object, something strange happens. Master Chief sees visions of a child playing. These artifacts that the Covenant are looking for are usually Forerunner artifacts, right? Forerunners were an advanced race that were responsible for seeding worlds with life and unicorns and blah 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 up until their inevitable war with what we consider human ancestors, right? Which led to their inevitable downfall, wiping out all life in order to stop the spread of the Flood, which was a weapon created by the humans because fuck you, right? That's basically the story. Despite this, Forerunner artifacts are very responsive to human touch. The reasoning behind this is pretty simple. The human race was meant to take over the mantle of responsibility, which you can consider like the protection of life and, you know, the rainbows and the unicorns and stuff that I mentioned earlier, right? So naturally, all Forerunner technology can be activated by human touch. This is also why the monitor of Installation 04343 Guilty Spark refers to the Master Chief as Reclaimer, because humans were meant to reclaim the mantle. This is also the same thing that the Didact in Halo 4 is complaining about. He's complaining why humanity is the one that gets to take up the mantle, why the Forerunners are forced to recede, and blah blah blah. That's basically what he's bitching about. So anyway, this part is pretty accurate, right? Forerunner artifacts react to humans. The Covenant still managed to reverse engineer a lot of Covenant technology thanks to the race of aliens that lead the Covenant, known as the Prophets. The Prophets is actually a great segue into the next bit of this episode, which I believe to be is the main reason this show fucking sucks. And this is the main reason. But anyway, we gotta pedal back a little bit. So we're briefly introduced to Dr. Catherine Halsey, the creator of the Spartans and Cortana, quite possibly one of the most well-rounded characters in the original story. And I emphasize this because she's completely flawed from the ground up. This character is... I think this character is amazing. Let's put it like that. There's a lot of characters in Halo, specifically, you know, female characters, that are written fucking amazing, right? And she's one of them, except in this. So right after this, brief little snippet of Halsey, and we'll talk about that later, we zip over to the High Charity, the command and control center of the Covenant. It's pretty much where they live and what they call home. A prophet is kind of speaking to someone, referencing an elite that witnessed the Master Chief touch and activate an artifact, which absurd, right? Unheard of. The artifacts usually don't react to the aliens that touch them. So anyway, the person this prophet is talking to is revealed to be a woman, a human woman, who is referred to as, I think, like the Holy One or some shit like that. Now, this problem should be self-explanatory, but for those of you that don't care enough to know the lore of the series, I'll just briefly explain it in a way that I think makes a lot of sense. This prophet, who we come to know as the Prophet of Mercy, should never, ever, 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 ever allow a human being anywhere near their homeworld at all. Not even this. The prophets don't want humans anywhere at all. And there's a reason for that. The prophets actually know that humans can use Forerunner technology, and it is that exact reason that they did not offer them a position in the Covenant and instantly called for their genocide from the get-go, right? You see, this is how the Covenant normally works. They encounter a species, whether they're advanced enough to join their ranks or whatever or not, they try to absorb them into their kind of entity. You know, they convert them to their religion. Think of it like the Crusades, right? Either you're with us or we're gonna fucking kill you. That's the way they work. Almost every species in the Covenant is converted into the Covenant, right? You have the elites, the grunts, the jackals, the hunters. They're all converted into the Covenant. They were never originally Covenant, right? Now, all these alien species, it basically wants everybody to pursue the Great Journey, which is like a giant suicide pact, okay? The prophets make no attempt to contact humanity in this way. And as a matter of fact, one of the first things that they say when they encounter the humans is something like, the gods demand your destruction, we are their divine instruments, basically. What they essentially say is, fuck you, we're going to kill you. And the prophets kind of give out this order to all the Covenant that humans are heretics, right? They're heretics and they need to die. For we cannot take any prisoners, nobody can live, kill everybody. That is literally what they say. So the Covenant reveres the prophets as holy. So naturally, this new race coming in and revealing that, hey, they can use all the ancient technology that we worship, no issue. It's kind of not a good look for the prophets, you know, whole we're the holy chosen species thing. So this human being accepted into and working with the prophets is almost completely impossible to even conceive, right? I say this because a lot of people say, well, why wouldn't the prophets use humans if they can access the Forerunner technology? And, well, yes, the Covenant has gotten this far without human help, right? They salvage and they reverse engineer Forerunner technology and add it to their pile of shit. The main point is their religious dominance would be questioned, and their position in their own ranks would falter, right? It'd be like if Jesus Christ suddenly appeared in front of the Catholic Church and told all the Christians that everything they had known was wrong and that all of the people telling them it were liars. It effectively undoes the glue that binds the Covenant together, right? Now, when the Covenant discovered the sacred rings and incorrectly assumed that firing the rings they would be achieving immortality status in the Great Journey, they did use Miranda keys. This was, of course, after the prophets had already decided to undo a core facet of their entire power structure. They opted to kill all the elites from their ranks, particularly due to some of them questioning the faith of the prophets, right? Which led to the First Covenant Civil War. At this point, it didn't matter who had faith in them because the prophets opted to use brute force. Get it? In this timeline, Reach is not only still alive and functioning, but the Covenant are actively using a human woman. It's not even a prisoner. If it was a prisoner, maybe. But the fact that she's wearing robes and she's allowed to just do whatever she is, it's a little weird. Maybe in future episodes they'll be like, oh my god, she's actually totally a slave. But at this point, it's just this is one thing that just wouldn't happen, especially not from the Prophet of Mercy. Maybe like a lower ranking one that was trying to make his way into the higher ranks, maybe, because those guys are assholes with their ranks. Like, honestly, they're like bishops. They just kill each other all the time. So it can't get much worse than this, right? Well, wrong. Time for a little bit of tokenization for you guys. So Miranda Keys is introduced and is unsurprisingly, well, you know, they made Miranda Keys black, which is whatever. Captain Keys is also introduced and is also unsurprisingly black. Now, normally I wouldn't have too much of an issue with this, but at this point it is very hard not to notice that this show is kind of pandering and forcing diversity, by which I mean, let's be fair. If these characters stayed true to their actual character roots, it's not that big of a deal. A lot of people have issues with changing colors of characters or genders of characters, and I really could give a shit less as long as the story kind of makes sense, you know what I mean? But still, just saying, these are two characters that are inherently white, like white, like about as white as you can get, and they've made them black. The problem is they haven't been changed for the better. These characters are weird. Miranda Keyes was every bit as tough as her father and as brilliant as her mother, Dr. Catherine Halsey. A bit of somewhat of an unknown fact is that a lot of people don't know that Miranda Keyes is actually Dr. Halsey's daughter, and she's the daughter of Captain Keyes, obviously. So Captain Keyes has this unwavering respect for the Spartans, and also, doing what he seems right, even if he's going completely against the uniform. He specifically has a kind of an attachment to John, because the only Spartan that Dr. Halsey went to directly get, and that Captain Keyes accompanied her, right, was John. He was the only one that Keyes met directly, like before everything started happening. So Captain Keyes has always had this kind of respect and understanding for John and his situation, because he essentially is one of the people that stole him from his family, right? However, both, Miranda and Keyes in this show are just morally gray right now. They were both basically given orders to kill the insurgent child, who is Article 72, and they don't seem to have too much of an issue with it, which I just think is totally not how either of these characters would behave at all, And while we're on the subject of characters that have been changed, we can go with Admiral Paragonsky. I think that's how you pronounce her name. Now, if you wanted female empowerment, this character is right up there with some of the most ruthless fucking characters ever conceived. She leads the Oni subdivision, which essentially functions as a Black Ops, right? She is directly responsible for so much chaotic shit happening in this series. And she's obviously portrayed in all forms of media as this frail old white woman with white hair that is constantly looking for a replacement because she doesn't want to keep doing it. She's too old, whatever that. And in this version, she is undeniably Indian, and she's younger, but also not very subtle about her operations anymore. I mean, she has no issue telling an entire room that she plans to kill a child, which is definitely something the character would do. But the trick about her character is that you would never see it coming. She's not the type to announce this shit. This is the type of thing you send in an encoded message to some sleeper cell on some other planet, and they fly and kill the person, right? Now, obviously, there's a lot of opportunity. If they had read the source material, they could have easily fixed all of these characters, which they might eventually. But right now, Admiral Paragonsky, if they wanted to change her character, they could have just made this character her replacement, and it would have been totally fine, because she's actively looking for a replacement. It's perfect. But anyway, Admiral Paragonsky orders John to kill the kid, and he doesn't, because Dr. Halsey. So he like shuts off the feed to the ship, and Dr. Halsey says one of the most fucking stupid things that I think I've ever heard. This sounds like some shit that you would find on I Am Very Smart, right? Neuroglitch? What the fuck does that even mean? Is Dr. Halsey suddenly stupid now? Somehow the command bridge thing takes control of the ship's oxygen and tries to kill the girl and make John pass out. They manage to bypass this, and John shows his solidarity with the girl by taking off his helmet. It's the first fucking episode, man. We couldn't have at least tried to do like the Mandalorian with this shit, where the last episode is the one where he takes it off and we're all like, oh my god, That's what they've done in every fucking game, right? Every game. In the first game, they teased him taking off his helmet right after the end of the game. And like all of the games, he almost takes his helmet off at the very, very end. And in this one, we're just like, oh, it's the first episode. It's 20 minutes in. Here's John's face. Congratulations, right? This is pretty bad just for me. John is exceptionally old for this timeline, which just makes everything all the more confusing. Now, prior to this, Dr. Halsey drops one of probably the most jarring portions of this series that I think kind of sells it as being very bad for very bad reasons. The Spartans have all had their memory wiped. So, John, by touching this artifact, has been having his memories resurface, his memories of him as a kid. If you didn't know, the Spartans were taken as they were children, replaced with clones. The clones would die after a couple years, and then the Spartans would just, train to be super soldiers. That's basically what it is. Now, let me explain a little something about Dr. Halsey. She is, without a doubt, one of the best characters in this series for several reasons. Her honesty, her deception, and above all else, her care for the Spartans, right? When the Spartans were first taken as children, Dr. Halsey directly told them that they could never go home. She told them that they would become the saviors of humanity and essentially super soldiers. She didn't want to lie to them, okay? And throughout the entire story, Dr. Halsey has only ever lied to the Spartans to preserve their life. And sometimes she's kind of a bitch about it. Well, to be fair, okay, fair enough. Dr. Halsey's concern, though, can be seen through Cortana. Cortana is a flash clone of her brain and has a strong attachment to John due to Halsey's preference of him, for reasons you and I can assume are strictly platonic. This kind of shows a little bit in this series when Dr. Halsey specifically orders Silver Team to kill anybody that tries to harm John, including UNSC personnel, which is essentially telling her, if friendly fire is off, you can shoot your teammates if you need to. So, what we've essentially made is Dr. Halsey a villain for all the wrong reasons. She was a terrible person for kidnapping children and making them super soldiers, but they eventually became the saviors of humanity and were grateful for it. At least they like to think they were. John kind of struggles with the idea of whether or not he thinks he would be grateful if he had been given the choice, right? But he didn't get a choice. He was kind of had the choice taken from him. Her reasoning would be ruining their lives is for the sake of billions, right? And that is objectively true. They did save billions. This new Dr. Halsey not only stole children, but wiped their memories, essentially made them machines, and has been lying to them their entire life, which is how this Dr. Halsey talks about them. She talks about them like they're machines in this stupid fucking rambling bit you get where she's trying to explain why John does something. Whereas the actual Dr. Halsey, if her Spartan does something, she would probably just say, I don't know, he's a fucking Spartan. What do you want me to say? The Halsey in the books has such a weird respect for the Spartans. She almost refers to them as godlike creatures, right? It's kind of cool. Whereas this one is referring to them almost strictly as machinery. Now, this is obviously a callback to Cortana and Master Chief. Often their conversations delve into which one of them is actually the machine. The Chief, who carries out orders without hesitation, or the artificial intelligence Cortana, who, has more personality than Chief has brain cells, probably. Oftentimes, the Chief referred to Cortana as a tool, right? One that he needed to ensure was functioning and battle-ready at all times. However, at the end of the games, we kind of see that the Chief has developed a connection to Cortana, an emotional connection that he shouldn't develop with, a tool. So, the Chief and his new sidekick disappear into the distance after the artifact, which apparently is a very selective EMP, helps them escape. And that's pretty much the gist of this premiere. So, all in all, what was wrong with this series premiere? A lot. Shields were weird. Silver Team is basically either Gray Team or Black Team from the novel series, or at least operates somewhat like them, but really just seems like a copy and paste Blue Team, complete with, their individual specific roles. The Covenant allows humans in their ranks. Miranda and Keyes don't seem to care for the Spartans at all. Dr. Halsey is doing a full body clone of herself instead of just the brain. Dr. Halsey refers to the Spartans as if they were robots. Reach still exists. The Covenant War hasn't happened yet, or if it has happened, it's on such a small scale that the Insurgents don't even believe it's true. No rings have been discovered yet. The Master Chief immediately takes off his helmet. Admiral Paragonsky is not the Game of Thrones ruthless operator that we know her to be. The plot seems pretty boring, to be honest. Did I forget anything? If I did, let me know in the comments below, because if anybody else is a fan of Halo, I fucking love Halo. Now, what was good? The action was obviously on point. You really get the feel for like the Covenant weapons and shit. That was cool. There were some first-person scenes in there that were not like, I get what they were trying to do, but they just didn't execute it very well. But the action scenes are great, right? The opening sequence, like I said, was amazing, and it went all downhill from there. Dr. Halsey does refer to John as his first name. And, you know, she is the only one, if not the only character aside from John or Cortana, that actually uses his name directly to, you know, talk to him. Dr. Halsey refers to all Spartans as their names instead of their numbers, which is kind of her separation from the fact that she's not military. She cares about them kind of like a mother in a fucked up way. The space nut that fuels ships. That was the space nut that fuels ships and makes you high. That was pretty funny. I like that one. Honestly, my expectations were pretty low to begin with, so I'm not entirely disappointed. My hopes were too low to even be disappointed, if that makes sense. I was actually pleasantly surprised when I watched the opening sequence and shit just started exploding. I was watching it with Ray, and we were both just like, what the fuck? This is going to be amazing. But it wasn't. But yeah, all in all, I don't know how I feel about this series as a whole. It doesn't seem like it's going to go in the direction I want it to go, but also just the fact that it's completely its own thing almost makes it not worth watching, because every episode that I watch, I'm going to find shit that I don't like or something that doesn't match up with the lore. Something's going to bother me. But it's Halo, and I love Halo. And if there's anything you guys know about me, it's when I love something, I have to watch it, even if I hate it. So hopefully the next episode is better, and hopefully, I don't know why I'm saying hopefully. It's probably going to be shit. But thanks for watching.